Hello my little loves. Today I'm here to talk about all the books that I read in February. I read a total of 10 books. None of those were physical this time round, so it was a combination of audiobooks and digital reads, and the majority theme-wise, genre-wise, was horror and thriller, creepy stories basically. So the first one I've got to talk about here today is Savage Her Reply by Deirdre Sullivan. This is the second book that I've read by this author. I think back in January or December I read Wise Creatures. I was excited to try some more. She's got quite an extensive backlist of books, and this is a fairy tale retelling of The Children of Lear, which I had never read before that I can remember anyway, unless it's a Hans Christian Andersen adaptation or something, because I've read a massive collection which I'm pretty sure I had all his works in at one point. So if it was in there, then I've read it and I've just not remembered. If it's not that, then I haven't read it. I don't know why I decided to go on a tangent there. But anyway, Children of Lear story is basically the gist. You've got your evil stepmother who has women's rage, you know, and in a jealous fit of passion changes her stepchildren into swans, curses them basically. Savage Her Reply is very heavily influenced from the fairy tale, but we are following, I want to say, Aoife, who is the stepmother, and it's basically her story, her like villain origin story, if you want to look at it that way. And honestly, it was absolutely fantastic. I don't think it was a disservice not having read, or at least not having remembered, the original fairy tale, because I got so much enjoyment out of this, so much nostalgia, strangely enough, melancholy, that's the word I'm looking for. It was melancholy, and I absolutely adored it. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. Sullivan's writing just perfectly captured the whimsical and ethereal tone that fairy tales have, but it just felt that much more brutal and like realistic with the harsh consequences of actions, you know. And I know a lot of fairy tales originally stem from a darker source, but I feel like playing more on those themes and kind of seeing the reasoning behind Aoife's decisions and kind of what got her to this point to take out her hatred of her husband Lear onto the children, which are actually her sister's children, which makes it even worse, you know. It was just so harrowing and heartbreaking, but it felt brutally realistic in terms of the reasoning and like the emotions behind the magic, you know. Aoife's narrative was just absolutely haunting and troubling, and just seeing her spiral down really into this self-loathing and hateful creature was so sad. Overall, this was a beautiful retelling of a twisty tale with such intricate and thought-provoking writing and very deep characters. After that, I picked up some digital copies of a couple of horror books, and these are free available through the free little horror library or something like that. Those words, but it might not be in that order. From Dark Lit Press, the publishing house, which is kind of like targeted at independent horror authors. So the first one I picked up from there was Nightmare Hymns, Tales of Religious Horror, and this is by a plethora of people. It includes people like Caitlin Marceau, Brett Laurie, Michael R. Goodwin, and yeah, this is very horror, very dark, gritty stories. I feel like this is one of the books that I want to do a dedicated review on, so I probably will just whiz through some brief thoughts on this. I don't really have a generalized synopsis to give you guys. It is literally an anthology collection of horror that themes around the religious, the occult, anything with like a type of god or belief or faith interwoven in there, and it's just explored in complete different ways, obviously horrifying ways. Like the tales in this were ranging from twisty and gory to thrilling and more psychological in storytelling. And honestly, I just had a really great time getting to sample some stories from authors that are new to me. So I ended up giving this one a 5 out of 5 stars. After that, I picked up my first Lorgus Larson book. Hopefully I'm pronouncing their name right. This is Toothworms, and I have definitely seen this cover on the horror side of TikTok, and honestly, I was so excited to get to it. I ended up giving this one a 5 out of 5 stars. It was fantastic. It's about our main character, whose name I have forgotten at the moment, who feels like there's something like throbbing in his teeth, and it's worms. It's teeth worms. Like, it's so it's horrible, because going to the dentist and issues with your teeth is such a human like fear. Do you know what I mean? It's such a common human fear, and a lot of it stems through anxiety related issues. Like, when you have a lot of anxiety going on, you often dream about your teeth falling out or pain in your mouth. Do you know what I mean? Like, those are quite closely linked. So to have a horror story using that as the theme was absolutely terrifying. And personally, I haven't got a fear of the dentist or like teeth or anything like that, but it's definitely made me look at it a different way. Just the thought that something in there is wriggling around and causing all this pain and discomfort and is doing like bodily damage to you, and it's in your mouth, like, that's just terrifying. It was so well written. For such a tiny story, I think it was like literally 10 pages. It packed such a powerful punch. It was absolutely fantastic. Honestly, I wish it was longer. Following from that, I continued on with some of Law's work, and I read The Family, which at the time I didn't realise that it was a sample chapter from a bigger piece. So I still gave it a 5 out of 5 stars because I thought it was fantastic. It was like a monster at the door sort of thing. It was creepy. It was like a family trying to escape this monstrous situation that was entering into their home to kill them, eat them, you know, do awful things to them. It had the tone of a domestic thriller home invasion, yet it was steeped in eldritch horror. So I thought the blend of those kind of like entities was really well done and quite unique. After I reviewed this little snippet on my Instagram, the author kindly reached out to me and gave me some more of their work. So I've got some e-copies of books to get through, including the full version of The Family. The full name, I forget what the actual novella is called, like the full piece is called, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting into that. Thank you as well, Law, for sending those my way. If you find this video somehow, I appreciate that. Finally finished off this audiobook that I feel like I was listening to for ages, and that is The Sacrifice by Rin Chapeko. I had previously read the Girl in the World duology by this author, and quite a few of their books were free on Audible. Setting is an island oasis turned deadly when a terrifying legend threatens to kill off visitors one by one. I ended up giving this a total of 4 out of 5 stars overall. There's so much more steeped in like myth and lore and legends and belief and faith than I was expecting, and I really enjoyed that route. I thought it gave it so much depth and just dimension to the storytelling, and it just had, so a lot of the time when you have these kind of isolated stories where they're on like a desert island and they accidentally on purpose trouble the ancient ruins, you know, and all hell breaks loose, they don't really go into the cultural legends of it, of why that's such a big issue. You know, it's always centered and focused on the characters that have just waltzed in and decided to mess around with stuff they shouldn't be messing around with. But what I liked about this story is really get the people that are indigenous to the island and the local area, their perspective of it. We have a tour guide and they're going around showing, basically there's like a TV crew who are trying to get some information on this island. They've heard all these rumours about it being magical and haunted, but you get the perspective is pretty much 100%, I believe, from tour guide, the lore and the legends and the stories, and just having that was so interesting, and it was definitely my preferred vibe, I would say, because I just loved the lore and the history and the reasons of, okay, that's why this is happening, and actually no, this is the reason, yada yada yada. I just thought it was such a great perspective to read from. The horror, if I had to describe it, was definitely like a slow burn. It wasn't super terrifying, in your face jump scare, and it wasn't like straight from the beginning. It slowly trickled through as the story progressed. More and more things were happening that were a little bit sinister, a little bit supernatural, and yeah, it kind of just built from there. And in that sense, I guess it was quite psychological in that way as well. It felt super relatable with queer identification, social media use. One of the main characters is an influencer, and obviously you've got the whole concept of this TV crew going there and trying to film like Most Haunted sort of thing, you know. But it's definitely current, very modern, very up to date. Wish that I had listened to this in a tighter time frame, because as I mentioned, it took me forever to finish this, but I think I had started it, or I had stopped halfway or something at a period of time where I was moving home, and I predominantly listen to audiobooks when there's a quiet moment at work and I just plug in, continue with what I need to do, and I hadn't been at work, so I wasn't listening to the audiobooks, and I thought, oh, actually when I'm moving and stuff I'm going to listen into a lot, but no, it wasn't really time for me to switch off and plug in. Not like there was so much time and space between me like picking it up next time and then forgetting what I'd read. Do you know what I mean? But hey ho, that's just a me thing. Another audiobook I listened to was Rogue, Renegade and Rebel by Michael Ondaatje. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. 1901, Queen Victoria passes away only to take over in the paranormal court. She employs the help of human agent codenamed Rogue. For 100 years, this agent has helped settle problems between the normal and the paranormal world. I ended up giving a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's described as a mega book omnibus. It compiles the first 3 books in, I think it's a 9-book series overall of this steampunk series. We are pretty much thrown straight into the action, and I really enjoyed it. Like, the pacing and the high-paced action was just very complimentary for it. Like, it just worked. Usually I'm like, oh my god, what's happening? I'm very overwhelmed, I don't know these characters and all that jazz, but it worked well, and I just easily fell into step with it, which was a nice circumstance, I suppose. Actually reminded me of like an adult version of Skullduggery Pleasant, which I adored. I did find there was a lot of cringy definitions used quite a bit, but I mean, it was alright. That part I just kind of glazed over. It was just like the big boobed bitch is back. I don't think that's an exact phrase, but it was something along those lines. I might have snipped 2 pieces together, but it was a bit extra. Anyway, I still overall really enjoyed this, and I would definitely continue on with the series. Next up, I listened to another free horror library book, and this is Damned to Hell by Mike Salt. Again, I've had so much luck with the books I've been reading during this month. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and we're following our main character, who has just got in such an awful slump in his life. His son had passed away and his wife has divorced him. He is just working I don't even think it's 9 to 5. He's working a job that was not the career that he used to have. He's not enjoying it. He's drinking himself in a stupor every night, and he's just absolutely hating life. Until one day he decides, you know what, I need to make a change, and that's gonna start with me getting back in touch with my old friend who was so good to me, and I cut him off for no reason. However, this friend ends up asking him this question, and it kind of throws the trajectory completely off for his idea of trying to better himself. The question is, what would you do to see your son again? And it just gets a bit crazy from there, and it just was a harrowing story. I don't think you can put these 2 words together, but I'm going to do it anyway. It was gloriously depressing. Like, the actual conversations of mental health, grief, loss, all that sort of thing was just so well depicted. But it got to the stage where, I forget his name, but our main character was just so overconsumed by it that he ended up doing the most heinous things in order to get that little bit of time with his son again. And it makes you really reflect and think, like, what would you do to see a loved one who's departed again? I would like to think that I wouldn't do that, any of what he did in this book, but you can see how people will be driven to insanity to just hold the one they loved. I can only imagine how it must feel for a parent to, you know, try and see their child again. But oh my goodness, it was so emotional in that way, so moving in that way, and I wasn't expecting to get the depth of feeling that I got from it. Overall, it was very rich. It is more, this is like I think it's an ongoing series. It's actually a re-release with Darklit Press, but the series is kind of like interlinked in a way, so you're following a different main character each time. But I believe at the end of I think Mike said at the end of like the epilogue sort of thing, you get a snippet of an old character or something to that effect, where they will kind of slowly link. So is it called the Linkville? I want to say it's called the Linkville series, so maybe that makes sense. Anyway, I really enjoyed my time reading this. I was recently invited to be a reviewer for Readsy Discovery. My first e-arc from there, and that is The Seer by R.S. Daniels. And I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. We're following David. I want to say his name's David. I'm so bad with names this month. I'm so sorry. But our main character just suddenly has this kind of like waking vision dream of a little girl saying, come find me. And it begins this spiral of him being able to speak to the deceased and solve, what's the word? Cold cases. I think for me, this would have been a much more punchy tale had it just finished at the first story, the first character. You quickly realise it's going to become kind of routine, where he's going to go on this slog where he gets another vision and he looks for the person, he gets another vision, he looks for the person, yada yada yada, and it becomes very formulaic. But I think it would have been more effective had we have just had that one and finished there. I kind of look at it as 2 parts to this story, because the first part absolutely loved, really enjoyed. The second part is when we were kind of getting the repetitive part, and I was like, okay. And we had a bit of a time jump, and we also had a new perspective thrown in, and this perspective just, I wasn't connected very much. I was a bit confused by the whole situation. They did link up eventually, and it kind of made sense, but it then went into this whole kind of biblical war sense, and it just seemed like a complete different story in the second half. So personally, I think this would have been a 4 stars had that second half just not existed at the end for me. But it was still a decent read. I still enjoyed it. I just wish it would have stopped at that halfway point. I read another of the little horror shorts, and that was 23 McCormick Road by Caitlin Marceau, and this one I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. Following, I don't know if they're newly married, I think they might be, relatively newly married couple, and they move into their dream home together. They are having an amazing time, just kind of decorating it and just having a wonderful time with it, when one of the wives gets, what's her name, Eve, she starts getting this really unsettling feeling that someone is watching her. Even when her wife's away, when her wife's home, when she's got her neighbour around, like she still feels watched. And it has to do with this car, this rusted out car that is like lodged into an elm tree right on front of their house, like right at the front of their house. Adored the relationship first and foremost. I thought it was so nice that we had woman on woman love without there being this whole kind of battle you had to go through. Like, don't get me wrong, I do love a coming of age story, a coming out story, queer stories where they're finding their identity, going through their hardships, coming out better on top, or maybe not coming out better on top, maybe, you know, struggling with the identity and everything like that. But what is, I feel, so rare in literature across genres, let alone in horror, is an already established relationship that is same-sex or non-binary or just queer in general, queer love, right? Where there's not like a device thrown in of homophobia and hate crimes and all that. It's just, this is them, the 2 wives, the story is now they're being haunted. Do you know what I mean? Like, I love that. That made me happy. The ghost story portion of this was so sad. Every time I felt myself getting uncomfortable or like frightened, I just couldn't help but be empathetic like Eve and be like, oh my God, this is actually really sad. Like, as she learnt more about who this ghost could be, and what his story was, you just couldn't help but feel just so sorrowful for him. And like, my heart, honestly, it actually makes me want to cry. So yeah, I thought this was such a fantastic short story. I absolutely adored it. The last book, this is a YA thriller, and it's very acclaimed. A lot of people love this one. It's One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. I had read The Cousins back in January and absolutely adored this one. I equally adored this one. This was also a 5 out of 5 stars for me. I think a lot of people know this now. 5 students go into detention, only 4 come out, one of them passes away, and there begins this rumour, fear-mongering investigation of who's killed this kid, what's happened, why, you know, what's going on, and of course all their secrets start to come out. And just thinking about it now, it's giving Pretty Little Liars. I have this website or blog, shall we say, where they secrets are unearthed, and it's like giving A vibes. I never expected like any of the twists. The characters felt way more dimensional than I was expecting, and I don't even know why it was more than I was expecting, because I really enjoyed the characters in The Cousins. Knew that this was very highly loved. It's got an adaptation, everybody enjoys it, so I don't know what was putting me off. I think it was just the hype, to be honest. I get so nervous with hype. So invested in all of the characters. I think my favourite though might have been Bronwyn. It was just all exciting, immersive, thrilling, fantastic story. I had a great time reading this. Anyway, that wraps up the 10 books I read in February, and Elsa is here weaving between my feet. Thank you so much for watching. You guys should let me know what you read during February. Did you read any horror books? Do you think it's strange to read other books that aren't romance during the month of love? I realised I read nothing that was romantic, but I don't really read romance often anyway. So it just made me chuckle that really everything was terrifying and disturbing. Let me know what your favourite book was if you had one, and I will catch you in another video soon. Bye.